There we go. Hi, everybody. It's December 5th, 2024, and this is the weekly Backdrop Developer Meeting. We get together most every week to talk about development priorities for Backdrop CMS. My name is Nate Lampton. I'm QuickSketch on the internet, and I'm the technical lead of the Backdrop project. We've got a little group here today. It's been 2 weeks since we last met, but yeah, we have some progress to report on a lot of things, and yeah, we'll be going through that plus the 1.30 priorities. So let's go around the room and do some introductions first. We'll start with Irina, and then we'll go to Justin.
Hello, hi. My name is Irina Zaks. I identify as site builder, but I do development when needed. I also identify as system architect and many other things, and open source evangelist. And I'm here to learn more about releases. And thank you. And
Great.
we had tsunami warning, if anyone cares.
Yes, I also got that here in Oakland. Thanks, Irina. Justin, and then Tim.
I'm Justin Kaiser. I'm a developer in Muncie, Indiana for a nonprofit called Academy of Model Aeronautics. I have a lot of websites and I like contributing to Backdrop. So
Thanks, Justin. Tim, and then Eli.
Hi, I'm Tim in Kansas City as opposed to St. Paul, Tim, to remove some confusion. One of the things I'm looking at is porting a theme from Drupal called UIKit, which is a CSS framework, and bringing it over into Backdrop. And there is an issue, number 6748, that I'm looking at just talking about. So
6748. Okay, great. Thanks, Tim. Eli?
Hello, my name is Eli Lissick. I'm a developer with Giant Rabbit. I'm in San Diego, California.
All right. Thank you, Eli. That's everybody for today. Let's dive right into. Oh, actually, hang on. There's more. We have some new contrib projects since we last had a dev meeting. There's a good half dozen of them today. There are auto login URL tokens, auto login URL, boxed in 3-column footer, which is a layout project, search API autocomplete, data tables, conditional rules, and Justin's module OpenAI have all come out in the last 2 weeks. So that's great. Justin, since you're here, and I know you've presented on OpenAI at Backdrop Live, do you want to say anything about the state of your new module and where it's headed?
sure. It started off as a backport of the Drupal module, which got superseded while I was working on it by the new Drupal AI module. But it just uses OpenAI instead of all of the other AI providers. And the only vector database backend that it uses right now is Pinecone. But I got the embeddings working, so it chunks up your content and it sticks it in the database and it can send it to Pinecone, so you can do search with it. And all of the module works just like it did in Drupal, other than the vector database backend, and there's no ECA module because we don't have that.
Cool. That's great. Does it have the image captioning?
No, not yet.
Okay.
That is a goal for the future. Image captioning and well, search.
Yeah. Great. Well, awesome. Thank you, Justin. All right. So topics for today. We were talking with Irina a little bit before the meeting about the release process and making new major versions of a project and then making that major version the supported version. Irina's in the background trying to figure out if that advice that we gave before the meeting started will actually work. So we'll see. Hopefully by the end of the meeting, whether or not that pans out. Let's see. Eli had some questions about documentation, about contributing to our documentation and where content, where information should live. So one thing about our documentation is that it for the most part all lives on one website, which is nice. So the doc site, docs.backdropcms.org, is the clearinghouse for documentation on Backdrop CMS. The unfortunate thing, though, is that the way that content gets onto Backdrop CMS or the docs website just comes from like a number of different sources. So let's see. So useful things that are on here. It's actually funny. I don't quite know where the change records are. Here they are, change records. So before the meeting, you mentioned a couple of things, Eli, about things that were different from Backdrop and Drupal 7. And if it's a difference, like something that changed from one version to another, then it should be recorded as a change record. And so we do these usually as the changes are happening. You can see like this change, these two changes happened in the month of November, where we usually write out something like this. It's like, before this version, it was like this, and after this version, it's like this, describing how stuff has changed between two different versions. So for some changes, like FAST44 being on by default, that might be appropriate to place here in the change records. But then we'd need to backdate it because you can see change records go all the way back to 2013, and we'd need to also figure out when that actually happened, which we can get from the Git history.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. For something that's like pretty, small scope type of change like that.
Mhm.
And my other one was kind of like, it would have saved me some time to have documented some of the changes in the block render thing, but that's like a huge set of changes that happen. So I don't know if that's necessarily appropriate for a small thing like this, or if it should go in like the layout rendering documentation, or what the deal is. But like, for
Yeah.
example, the fact that if you give it a string, it will now give you back an array with markup is probably helpful for somebody to be able to search up and say, oh yeah, okay, this is expected, and not like something super weird.
Yeah, that's a good question about like, in-depth topics like could possibly exist as another page here. I think that would make some sense. And these pages are just nodes on the doc site, docs.backdropcms.org. And it might be the best place to put in-depth documentation like that. There's also another option that we don't see a whole lot of. Let me see. Here we go, topics. So topics like this might also be a good place for it to live. But topics like this is not a node. It's not editable on the interface. This is fed from the code base of Backdrop. And so, for example, this is where this file actually comes from, is Vue's API, or the topic comes from, I mean. And it's defined, I think it's a group. Oh yeah, def group. Yeah. So these define group sections here. So this is where views handlers, about views handlers. That's this page here, about views handlers. And so if there's a lot of content that's all owned by one particular, a lot of documentation that's all owned by one particular kind of thing, then it's defined as a group here in the source code, and then described using doc blocks, and then that gets converted into a page like this, which is, fairly reasonable from the doc blocks. And then stuff that is inside of this particular category, it doesn't look like there's actually ones here, but once you define a group, you can then also put stuff into that group. Yeah, here we go. Like these various actions, for example. And that's done by in the doc block, instead of def group, there's just, I think, group or maybe in group that is a PHP doc syntax for adding a function to a group of documentation. And so this kind of documentation is most useful when, well, as the name implies, there's a big topic that you can describe generally, and then there's a lot of functions or classes that all implement that particular concept. And so you describe it generally, and then you link all of the related functions or classes to the topic. So that's another big place that, stuff could potentially go, is into the code itself. And that's where a pull request would, need to be created to document that particular topic. I think that
Right. So that would be like a PR against core instead of a PR against the like documentations contrib thing.
right. And
Okay.
yeah. And the documentation that is like blog posts, they're not pull requests at all. They're just editing nodes directly on this backdrop website, the doc site.
I see. I got pointed somewhere on Zulip that was like a repo to PR like markdown changes to. I don't know if we're talking about if that's like still used or not.
Do you have a link to that?
Here, yeah, I can link it in the chat because I asked about documentation and then I got linked here.
Oh. Okay. Yeah, so this is the actual code base for the backdrop site, docs.backdropcms.org. And this is a totally valid place to like make a request or to ask your question actually about where do I put this documentation, or to dump documentation and then say, can we put this somewhere? Because then the webmasters from the docs site check this issue queue and they might publish that piece of content for you if you're not an editor yourself. And so, yeah, this issue queue is used both for like suggestions to documentation, as well as like there's functionality on the website that is broken or needs to be changed or needs to be fixed. And so, yeah, and any suggestions or comments or questions you have about the docs website, you can file an issue here. But for the most part, like the code inside of this repository is a backdrop website. And there isn't a lot of documentation that's like stored directly in this repository as code. Does that
I
all make
see.
sense?
Okay. Yep, totally. Thank you.
Yeah. So had you not brought it up here in this meeting, a good place to ask your question actually, and to put it in here and to have it record for discussion is to file the issue actually directly against this issue queue. And that's probably why somebody linked to this saying you should file your request for the adding the content here, but that's not actually where it will be input.
Okay, gotcha. Cool. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. While we're here on this site, I always like to pull up our form API reference because it's one of my favorite things about our doc site. I just love this page. That this table is generated from a combination of form API element nodes and form API property nodes. So whenever we add or change a form API element, we track them as individual nodes, then it combines those two types of content into this one very nice API documentation page. I just love it. So this is like a fourth type of content, the form API reference that we expand whenever there's changes to form elements. Okay. All right, let's see. Going back to the list of issues that we have for today, we had some posts to the forum for topics to discuss, and one of them was a feature request for Backdrop 1.30. There's issue 6390, add a parent menu selector to the add and edit link form. Sorry, just stop sharing now. I'm going to share it again. All right. So this started with bug folder almost a year ago at this point. Found this issue saying that sometimes the list of menus get really unwieldy when adding a menu item or editing a node. I guess actually this screenshot looks like it's specifically about moving stuff around in the menu UI itself. And he's suggesting that we split this up into two select lists instead of one, where you select the menu first, and then you only show the children of that menu as a second item so that you don't see all of the menus and all of the menu items from your entire website when you're creating or updating a menu link. And let's see, this was suggested that we talk about it, but I'm not quite sure how this is stuck. I haven't been following this real closely. I think that it's like stuck on technicalities. Looks like there's some options here, like maybe one version that uses Ajax and one version that uses JavaScript. Okay, here we go. Tim at least posted this nice summary. I love it when he does this. So what this current pull request does, this is what it was before with one menu link or one select list. Makes it into two. Oh, and then, okay, and then this is a somewhat contentious part here that changing the menu, the structure of this menu breaks some contrib modules. And the question here is like, what do we do about the contrib modules that are already extending this form? And one option here is that we could make a checkbox that on a settings page that basically toggles the new or old behavior. And I like this wording that he's got here. Add option to select a specific menu on menu item edit forms. Okay, maybe I don't like that as much as I thought I was going to when I read it out loud. But it would basically toggle this, like, are there two select lists or are there one select list? And the reason for that is that, here we go, Bug Folder did a nice audit here of modules that could be affected by this. And so content menu would be very incompatible. Menu views not compatible. I think that those two are the only ones that are clearly broken. So it's like a mix here. And then of course there's custom code as well. Yeah, I'm a little all over the place on this one. I'm not quite sure which way we should go yet because I haven't had enough time to evaluate the options. Policy wise, we're not required to maintain compatibility inside of forms. So splitting this from one menu item into two menu items, or sorry, one select list into two, is not officially covered under a backwards compatibility policy. But that doesn't mean that, we would knowingly break a lot of sites if it's going to cause sites to break or cause a burden. So yeah, it all just depends on where this lands as far as like whether we need that option, how badly these contrib modules are broken, and how likely it is that we would break other stuff that isn't in these contrib modules. So I don't have a lot of commentary for this one yet. I recognize that it's stuck, but it's going to take a little bit more of a deep dive, I think, to weigh which way stuff should go without somebody that's more knowledgeable telling me a better summary of the issue. So, sorry, St. Paul Tim, if that's not an adequate recap, but that's best we can do. So next one, Yorkshire Pudding, Martin Price raised this issue about MySQL 8 having an issue with some queries. The system table became, or the system became a keyword in MySQL 8, and now it's causing an issue. There's some good commentary and suggestions in here. There's a pull request too to get this working. It's not perfect because what it should be doing is it's putting it directly in the select query class, but there's already a method escape table here that is specifically for doing this exact thing. And so the code for escaping the table should be inside of the escape table method. I was looking at it before the meeting, and it looks like escape table. Let's see. So this is the MySQL class in the database abstraction layer. And kind of the issue here is that there is escape field and there is escape alias, but in the MySQL specific handler, there is not an escape table. And so the correct solution here is that we implement escape table in the MySQL class. And I think this is it. Like that's, I think, what needs to be done. And then we need to test it and make sure that that's not breaking anything. But yeah, it's funny because so quote identifier already exists and it's already adding backticks to the content here. And maybe this is another part of the problem here. It looks like there's backticks already in some situations. But I believe that this is what should be done. And that will add the backticks. So fingers crossed. I think that's what needs to be done. But the other thing that gives me pause here is MySQL 8 isn't new at this point. It's been around for quite a while. That we should also explore or just go back and check what Drupal is doing for this particular problem. Because it's likely that they've also run into and likely solved, or at least there's a patch available to fix this particular problem.
Is there a drawback to using the database name as a prefix to it? Or does that mess up like trying to connect to multiple databases at once or something?
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know if that would solve the keyword problem in the first place. I guess it probably would.
It does. I was actually connected to a database or a MySQL 8 database recently, and I got the same message that it couldn't access the system table. And so then I prefixed it with a database name, and that solved the problem. But I'm guessing that's a similar issue.
Yeah, it's this idea of prefixing with the database name came up recently because of a contrib module, the SSO module that Alan Mells wrote recently. And it uses a trick in the database abstraction layer that you can use database names as table prefixes in settings.php. And so that sounds like it would be one way to solve the problem, but I don't think it would be universal in being able to work because it would break this capability of prefixing in settings.php with the database names to share tables between different databases, because then you'd end up with the database being prefixed multiple times.
Gotcha. Thanks.
But yeah, it's a good thought. But yeah, I think backticks are the solution here. I think possibly the reason why we aren't seeing a lot of problems with this is, for first of all, our testing runs against MariaDB and not MySQL 8. And second of all, I think that our telemetry reports MariaDB being more popular by quite a bit. Backdrop. Let's see. MySQL version. Okay, so we've got one MySQL 8.4. At some point, I think these are sorted by their popularity, so it can make finding things a little bit tricky. Oh, well, actually, 8.0 being 20% of the reported sites, that's a fair number. And I wonder why and how this is happening in some situations. Create a new view of project. Oh, okay. This isn't like, okay, it has to do with the, okay. So it's a pretty limited situation where it occurs. Looks like it happens when you're making a view of modules or projects from your database. Because I was wondering, I was like, well, that seems like it would be a pretty major problem. The system table is widely queried throughout Backdrop, but it looks like it's a views specific issue that we're seeing here. Well, this needs a little bit more looking into. I think that the solution I suggested is the route to go, but if not, let's check what Drupal has done. All right, that's the issues that we've had for today. Oh, Irina, you have an update on your Contrib project?
I do have an update, so let me try to show you. I know this might not be correct thing, but I can show what I see. So this is Stanford Decanter. I'm only looking at releases. I'm not looking at the quality of code, because I think I created release from the wrong branch, but that is something that keeps happening when I'm not sure what I'm doing. So this is the latest release that I have, but when I try to install it here, I think I still get this one here.
Okay, and it does look like, okay, there's the new release. It is 2.0.0 with no suffixes, no qualifiers on it. So it's not beta or alpha. It's a final release. But it's not being flagged as the recommended version.
Right, and I didn't set it as pre-release. Also, I don't think that the code is correct there, so I'm going to, so then my next question is, can I simply delete it? Is there anything that I say I cannot delete a release if for some reason I feel that's not a correct release? If
I'm not
nobody
sure.
else-
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what will happen with that. I I don't think that it cleans up. I think that it will update if there's an if you recreate a release, it will update the node, but I'm not sure if it will delete it. But let's try it. I mean, you're here and I'm here, and we can just delete the corresponding
Great.
release on backdropcms.org if necessary.
So what happens if I delete this release right here? I want to delete this release because I'm sure that within the last 14 minutes, nobody downloaded it except for me. And here I expect to go back to alpha. Oh, sorry about my cough. Then I don't know if it will delete previous version, because what happens is when, so here I have, what happens is if I say install new theme here, right? So something that I shouldn't be doing in general, if I want to delete this, sorry, themes, I shouldn't be going into the backend to delete it. This is not the right thing to do. So I'm gonna go ahead, first I'm gonna go back and set something else as default. It's still, okay, so I'm gonna set this one as default.
Mhm.
There are some implications also for layouts, because we have another theme. So this one still Moscone flipped, so now I can reasonably safely delete it, which is not a good practice. Usually I shouldn't be going into a code to do these things. If my goal is to simply update, right?
Mhm.
So then the next thing that happens here, I say I want to install new theme. I'm gonna clear it. It will show up again. I don't have this theme right now. It takes some time to do the rounds. And so that then the next thing when I'm trying to install it, it allows me, it shows me, so this is it cleared, I say install, and this is where I have an option to change release.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I would love to clean it up. I just want to make sure that I do it safely.
Mhm.
So that's basically where I am right now, and I'm happy to follow best practices, and this is why I'm here, because this is not something I understand well.
Yeah. So it looks like for the time being, this requires intervention on backdropcms.org to set the recommended version. What we'd like to do, I think, is make it so that if you make a new release and make it act the way that I described it, and it's a final version, then that should become the new recommended branch on backdropcms.org. What I'm going to do is try to undo the problems we may have caused. So system desktop capture.
I might
Okay.
is there a way to reach out to you directly? Is it best way to ping you on Zulip or
The best thing to do, is kind of similar to the documentation request actually, is to post the request to the backdrop CMS issue queue. Sorry, the backdrop cms.org issue queue. So under
ops or
backdrop
org?
ops,
Okay,
backdrop ops is the group, and then backdropcms.org is here.
okay.
And then this is the issue tracker. So similar to the docs website, anything that is like a code enhancement, like the fact that we should probably be making it so that you can change your major supported version from GitHub without needing to log in, like that's a feature request. But also, like if there's a content change, like please just change my module to a different major version, then that would also go here.
Okay, so I will do that because we want to fix this because we're doing lots of fixes for the theme and I want to make sure that people are seeing the right things. Okay.
Great.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. No problem. All right. Let's see. One other issue I want to call attention to is the support for supplemental CSS selectors. This isn't in the 1.30 milestone yet, but I want it to be. Jen Lampton has been doing some work on this. Well, I checked in with her recently, and she suggested that if other people would like to help contribute to this, she would appreciate the additional help. So let me summarize this issue that this discussion has been going on for quite a while, but the problem that we have is that we want to make updates to our themes, and in particular, we want to make updates to Basis. That Basis has a number of style issues that could be fixed with CSS, but we are stuck not updating our CSS because we've designed and suggested to our users that Basis is intended to be a base theme, and a lot of people sub-theme Basis. And if we start changing the CSS inside of Basis, then that will affect all of the sites that have sub-themed Basis. This problem is also made much larger by contrib themes that also sub-theme Basis, and I can't remember the name of Tim's theme that St. Paul Tim's theme that expands Basis, but it would also be heavily affected, and there's a fair number of sites that are using that contrib version of a theme that it extends Basis. So after much back and forth, there's a solution that everyone here in this issue queue seems to be pretty happy about, which is making it so that Basis specifically will start adding a class in the preprocess function to the body that says which version of Backdrop you're running, or what version was installed, and then all previous versions prior to that version, adding classes to the body class, and then it makes it so that we can add CSS selectors that only apply to that version and before. Probably there will be some option to say always use all changes versus just use what has been changed since I first installed Backdrop. But it makes it so that sites that have been running Basis for a while or have sub-themed, they won't get any of these changes because the version of the body classes gets tagged to the version that they installed Backdrop from. So it's a little bit, I'm not explaining this very well. But basically what it means is that we can add additional CSS with these prefixes as new versions of Backdrop come out, and they will only apply to new installs of Backdrop. And existing sites get pinned to the changes that existed only at the time that they installed Backdrop. Now, a lot of people might not be sub-theming Basis, in which case they want to track all of the latest changes, and they just want to always have all of the CSS fixes. And so we'd like an option to make that possible, I think. So this is the general approach. It's not perfect, but after all of the different options that we've discussed, it's the lowest overhead. It's pretty simple to add additional CSS. It finally unblocks this issue, making it so that we can add a bunch of CSS fixes to Basis. And it's targeted. This is specifically fixing the problem for Basis and not for other themes. So if a better solution comes along, then we could adopt that better solution for all themes. Or this solution is also very simple. So if other themes need it, especially core themes in the future, then they could just implement the same solution. So it's funny. It's a kind of on topic here, Irina, because this is similar to your theme where you just make a new major version of a contrib theme, and that indicates, there's potentially breaking changes from 1 to 2. But
Yes.
inside of core, we don't have that kind of ability to just say one project has a major version change. Like we would have to hold off on API or like display breaking changes until backdrop 2.x, which continues to be a nebulous target where we're not seeing that. We're not going to see that any time in the near future.
I'd like to add here about the theme. Our first release of the theme was built on top of Basis. And then because Decanter itself is a major design system, there was so many they're like not just conflicts but overlaps. So we have Decanter is built on top of Tailwind. Basis is using partially Bootstrap, partially its own stuff. And so when we have 4 different foundations in the same place, it was very difficult to manage it. So in the second version, we made decision to completely disconnect from Basis, which created lots of interesting challenges. And I just realized how much Basis is actually Basis. So making any major changes to Basis can send a tsunami around.
Yep, which is exactly why this has been so difficult to figure out. So we're pretty certain that this solution is going to be safe for existing websites, and it's also easy to maintain. The one thing that it will make a bit ugly is sites that want to override the newly added CSS. It's adding another depth of selector, and so every time you override the additional changes, you'll also need to override the supplemental, you'll need to add that extra class in there. Unless you turn off that ability and then you just copy and paste the whole thing into your subtheme, and then you can remove the prefixes. So it's kind of fine because if you're subtheming, then you have the ability to fix the problems already. Like this is really more of a problem for the out-of-box experience for Basis is not great, and it's because we haven't been able to fix any of the CSS issues that are in the out-of-box experience, because we would affect and break subthemes because they might solve the same problem in a different way.
Yep.
So this issue is 4782. This would be really great if we could get it into 1.30. But we need to get it in pretty soon for it to be valuable, because if we add in the system, that's great. We can make future changes. But if we don't actually include any fixes in it, then there won't be any visual improvements to 1.30. So if we can get this completed sooner, then we can also start working through the long list of CSS fixes for the Basis theme that we could start applying into the 1.30 release. My pet peeve, the one that I'd really love to see fixed, is when you first install Backdrop, the congratulations, you installed Backdrop. That message is displayed and it's kind of awful. Like the cards are bumping up against the message, and there's a white band across the whole page there. The whole thing is not great. There's an issue for that one too, although I don't have it on hand. So there's a lot of stuff like that where the CSS fixes are ready, people have submitted them, but we haven't been able to commit them because they would break existing sites. So really hoping that we can get that fixed.
Yep. It's not very simple.
Okay, well, we're at the top of the hour, so we'll wrap it up for today. Thank you everybody for being here and bringing your thoughts and discussions. And we'll close out for today. We'll see everybody next week.
Thanks.
Okay, bye everybody.